My name's Tony Butler. I'm not from a farming background, but I've got a medical interest in the benefits of regenerative agriculture for prevention and treatment of disease, which is linked to poor nutrition. Now, this conference is about soil and ecosystems. I will briefly touch on the three reasons that soil is important for our health. Firstly, as a source of essential micronutrients. Secondly, in providing the right environment for healthy plants and animals to grow, which is a source of our food. And thirdly, in providing a source of microbes for our gut microbiome. Resilient breeds of plants and animals are healthier. Similarly, developing resilience is key to disease prevention in humans. And the pandemic of COVID-19 has shown that some people are more resilient than others. Those with underlying chronic health problems are more likely to succumb. Here's a shortened timeline of Homo sapiens since we evolved as a distinct species. It's not to scale. And you can see that we were hunter-gatherers for 180,000 years, and then 20,000 years ago we started agriculture, which enabled us to make settlements, start towns, cities, develop civilization, culture and technology. That is all very positive, but unfortunately there was a downside. We changed our diet because we started to grow a lot of cereals, and this became a major component of our diet. And anatomically, you can see from old skeletons that there was a loss of stature and musculature and development of chronic diseases such as diabetes type 2, cancer and arthritis. Then we came to the Industrial Revolution, where there was a lot of poverty and food deprivation, and we saw a huge rise in diseases. But that was mainly due to food deprivation. There was rationing during the war, and then after the war there was a huge drive to improve yields from farms, and there was this increase in the use of agrochemicals. When we got to about the 1980s, we started to see a rise in the incidence of diabetes, cancer, dementia and various other diseases, which were non-communicable. Therefore, the only reason why these developed was a change in our environment or lifestyle, and it did occur around the same time that we began to see an increase in agrochemical use. This slide shows the major determinants of health. The four green ones are easy ones to change in our life. That's short-term stress, which is good for us, diet, exercise and sleep, and the most important is diet. We are stuck with our genes, but often those genes do not cause the development of disease. Our lifestyle will determine which genes are switched on and off, and we call that epigenetics. Other hazards include pollution and chronic stress, which are common these days. Hunter-gatherers would have had mainly infections and trauma as a cause of shortening of life, and if they did not succumb to those, then they often lived into old age and very rarely showed signs of these chronic diseases. We now have an epidemic of non-communicable diseases. There is metabolic syndrome, which consists of obesity, diabetes type 2, cardiovascular disease and hypertension. We have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, cancer, dementia, osteoarthritis, autoimmune disease and allergies. So what is the cause of these diseases? Well, there are many postulated theories, but I just want to concentrate on the loss of gut microbe diversity. I would also add that the science that says that meat is bad for your health is very poor quality, and that the relative risk may increase by eating meat, but the absolute risk is still very tiny and is completely outweighed by the benefits of the nutritional content of properly raised meat. Similarly, saturated fats are no longer shown to be a cause of cardiovascular disease. It is a neutral outcome. What we should do is make sure that ultra-processed foods are consumed as little as possible. But I just want, as I say, to move on to a loss of gut microbe diversity as one of the causes. In 1939, Sir Albert Howard wrote in the BMJ that soil fertility must be the basis of the public health system, and that agriculture must be given its place as the foundation of preventive medicine. He'd travelled to India in former years to advise the Indian farmers on the benefits of conventional farming as practised in Great Britain. He came back some years later having found that the Indians had a great deal more to teach the UK farmers, and he learned from them the skill of composting based on manure and the elements of sustainable farming. And subsequently, he started the organic soil movement here in the UK. Another observation he had was that when school children were fed meals comprised of organic produce, the rate of infectious diseases and other illnesses fell dramatically. He had discovered that preventive medicine is anchored firstly in developing resilience by good nutrition. After the Second World War, pressure was on farmers to produce higher yields. The wartime armament factories now produce fertilizers instead of bombs, and this greatly increased yield. The downside was that soil structure and its inherent diversity gradually became degraded, and as a result produce became deficient in nutrients, reflecting the reducing quality of the soil. The increasing use of agrochemicals has continued to accelerate this decline, as evidenced by David Thomas in The Composition of Foods, where he compared the dramatic loss of minerals in vegetables and fruit between 1940 and 1991 as a result of the effect of these chemicals. For instance, one would have to eat 10 tomatoes now, as against 1 in 1940, just to get some of the essential minerals for our health. This is a list of some of the critical elements which have fallen in amount dramatically during the last 80 years. They are critical to our system, even though they are only needed in minute amounts. But sometimes they're needed many, many times a day to enable enzymes to be activated. This is a handheld light reflectance meter which has been developed in California by Dan Kittredge, who's a farmer and a scientist. It will measure the concentration of essential minerals, antioxidants and polyphenols in vegetables and fruit, for instance when you're buying them at the supermarket. It is now undergoing calibration trials. His work in the lab using more sophisticated bench meters has shown that there's a huge variation between similar looking produce. For instance, from the worst carrot sample to the best, there was a variation of 15 times for potassium, 6 times for calcium, and 4 times for zinc. The best to worst producers in descending order were organic uncertified, organic certified, glasshouse grown, and hydroponic. Obviously, healthy soil is the key to growing nutrient-dense food. So the above figures indicate that if you consume food that's less nutrient-dense, you have to eat a greater quantity of food to obtain an adequate mineral intake, and this is one of the reasons why we end up consuming more calories than we require for energy, and it might lead to obesity. I want to concentrate now on our gut microbiota. About 100 trillion microbes live in our gut from our mouth to the rectum, and they weigh about 5 pounds, which is 2 pounds more than our brain. They contain up to 200 times more genetic material than the rest of our body, and the highest number is in the lower bowel or the colon. We're continuously beginning to understand new roles that these microbes employ, from helping food digestion to making proteins, hormones, neurotransmitters for the brain, and preventing ill health through the immune system. And scientists have found association between diseases like diabetes type 2, obesity, and depression when certain species of microbe are present. Interestingly, no two people have the same microbiome. In twins, for instance, who share 99% of their DNA, they only have 30% similarity between their gut flora. This is because during life, environmental exposure to microbes in the prebiotic and probiotic foods that we eat varies greatly between individuals. Our first encounter with new microbes from which we construct our microbiome is during birth, as we pass down the birth canal. Then when breastfeeding, more types are obtained from the mother's skin. The environment continues to expose growing children to more species. The greater the diversity in the microbiota, the greater resilience we appear to have against disease. Conversely, antibiotics and some other medicines will reduce the diversity. Now, the soil microbes are very important in the development of a diverse microbiome. Interestingly, children who grow up on farms have a lower incidence of allergy and leukemia, and it's thought the microbiome plays a part in this. Eating a very diverse diet, especially of vegetables of many colours and types, maintains the diversity. However, The microbiome can change within hours of eating a different diet, so consistency is very important. And eating a superfood after a McDonald's does not cut it. Yet another link with soil microbes and our health is the nutritional value we obtain from eating fermented foods, such as mature cheeses, sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir and yogurt. And also raw milk contains organisms and vitamins that are destroyed by pasteurization. And one such vitamin is K2. K2 is very important as it prevents calcium from being deposited where it's not required in the blood vessels, but rather in the bone where it should be. There was some new research released last month by Dr. Tony Butler, no relative to me, and her team at the University of Newcastle. It demonstrated that beef reared as pasture-fed is more nutrient-dense than from cattle who are just grass-fed with grains for finishing. And it found that the improvement in levels of conjugated linoleic acid, and especially omega-3 long-chain fatty acids, was sufficient to market pasture-fed beef as an alternative to fish as a good source of omega-3 fatty acids. I think that this demonstrates that the quality of the soil and the rich diversity of the herbal layers on which the cattle feed results in their meat being very nutrient dense. So, a healthy soil, rich in microbes, can provide us with nutrient-dense food, species to colonize our gut, species to ferment food, and help us develop a profound resilience to disease. The moral? Eat real food, not ultra-processed food. Obtain it from real farms, and then you stand a good chance of having real health.